and welcome to episode 114 of Late Night Linux, recorded on the 1st of March 2021. I'm Joe, and with me are Phelim.
Howdy.
Graham.
Hello.
And Will.
Hello.
March? No, it's January, isn't it? Or February? I don't understand where the time has gone. We've got a lot to get into, so let's get straight on with it. Let's start with the news that Linux has made it to Mars. Yay. Another planet we've conquered.
Yeah, this is awesome. It's specifically to do with the NASA's recent mission to Mars. And is it Perseverance? It's called Perseverance. Yep. And there's a part of that mission is a tiny little, it looks like a drone, but it looks a bit more complicated than that. It's called Ingenuity, and I think that's running some Linux.
Yes, a custom-made ARM board at the heart of it that's running Linux. And there's a bunch of other open source software that they're using as well. They said in their press conference that they're using FFmpeg and various other stuff, and they name-checked open source specifically. So it's a pretty cool win for open source, I think.
I've looked at some NASA software before because they release a lot of it as open. I think they may have an obligation to do so when there's tax money involved. But there's some really, really interesting, super complicated kind of command module simulators and stuff like that it would be amazing if you're actually studying this kind of stuff. Mm. But I mean, it's still amazing that we can send robots to Mars and then this time launch a drone from the robot and fly around.
Am I the only one that's scared? The fact that we haven't actually tried to fly it yet. Could we not just go, it's BSD if it goes up in flames?
If they can get the landing right, I mean, that was phenomenal. And they even released the video stream from that, if you saw it. So it wasn't able to be transmitted live because it's like between a 5 and 15-minute delay. But the fact is you could see it from the kind of deployment vehicle and it hovered like on a jetpack and then lowered this thing the size of a car down onto the surface and also tracked from the orbiting satellite as well. Now, this is from my memory, but I think it's a 2 megabit link from the robot on the surface to the accompanying satellite, which then transmits data back to Earth, which is better almost than my internet connection.
Yeah, it's better than a lot of rural connections, certainly.
One of the cool things about this mission is the fact that it's got a microphone with it, which should be about the first time, I'm almost certain, the first time that we've got a microphone on another planet. I think it was Mars Polar Express was the one that last had one, and that went catastrophically off into space or into the planet. We're not quite sure which because someone mixed up metric and imperial. So they deserve that, I guess.
Can we blame Brexit?
I think so. It's only fair.
But more importantly, when's the first synthesizer going to be on Mars?
If somebody challenged me on Twitter, I kind of accepted if the sounds that we get from Mars, I'll do something with it. I think they've used like a size monitor to generate audio waveforms.
Yeah.
I think it was Opportunity, or one of the rovers had an actuator in it, and on its birthday, it played itself Happy Birthday.
That's amazing.
Well, some good news for the world and also for Linux and open source for once. So well done, NASA and JPL and everyone involved. So some shocking news that a desktop Linux distro being sold on hardware outsold Macs in 2020. The asterisk being that it's not really a distro, it's Chrome OS. So Chromebooks are more widespread than Macs. That's quite something.
I imagine that a lot of this, or a lot of recent sales, have come from people who are now working from home or people whose kids are studying from home. They need to get a laptop. They need a web browser and a webcam and a microphone and very little else. And a Chromebook is absolutely the right price point, the right form factor, and just like the perfect fit. And I can't decide whether this is Google just planning a long way in advance to a time where people would use what is a glorified massive phone, or just success of circumstance. But yeah, either way, it was a smart move on Google's part.
It's interesting to see the graph that IDC put together, and you can see the Windows market share just slowly starting to fall, and Chrome OS going up, and Mac OS being pretty much static.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Does this mean that Microsoft's going to have to come up with a similar strategy for Windows, kind of a browser on an NT kernel?
Well, they've kind of tried to do that with 10S, haven't they, which is like a locked down version. It's not quite to the point where it's just a browser. But then Chrome OS isn't just a browser anymore. You've got Android apps, Linux apps. It's getting more and more capable every year, seemingly.
Yeah, and It's something that I didn't get at the beginning. I must admit, there's lots of things that I don't get in the beginning, but this is another good example. I didn't understand years ago when they first started developing this, what kind of utility it would have. And I have to say, I mean, we've talked about it before, but my mum's got a Chromebook and it perfectly fits her needs. It's reduced the number of troubles she has, apart from printing. But in every other way, it's just a fail-safe device. And we've got one here and it's really useful for just picking up. The battery life is excellent. And yeah, as Will said, it's pretty incredible that they maybe guessed this day might be coming.
Do we think it's a good thing, though? Chrome OS is not Linux. It's not open as such, in the fact that you've got to use the Blink browser that belongs to Google, their app store. Does it really, in the long run, help anybody?
It depends which way you look at it, because it is Linux. It is running a Linux kernel, but it's not GNU/Linux as we know it. I mean, it's desktop Linux. It's just got enough proprietary shit in it to not really be of much interest to much of the Linux community. But this is an example of throwing a lot of money at desktop Linux. Unfortunately, not at open source, proper desktop Linux. But this shows what could have been done. If a huge company wanted to make desktop Linux a success, they could do it. And unfortunately, we've not had a big enough company try it.
It's Linux at the moment, but if Fuchsia becomes a thing in the next few years, then all of those Chromebooks will presumably stop being Linux and start being Fuchsia. So I think that we might be calling this a win a little bit early.
Well, I don't think it's fair to call it a win as such, because it's not proper open source desktop Linux. And I would imagine that we all benefit a little bit from the kernel stuff that they have to do and they do upstream. But ultimately, it's more a case of them commoditizing Linux and no one else benefiting, except the users who get a really useful bit of kit that's cheap and does the job well and gets updated regularly and doesn't get riddled with viruses.
Yeah, you're right. It's also a little bit like Linux's great success in the cloud, how little impact it's perhaps had on everyday desktop Linux users or Android.
Well, we do still have a completely open browser as well in Firefox, and version 86 came out recently. And we've given Mozilla quite a lot of shit, I think rightfully so, but I think you've got to acknowledge when they do something good as well. Now, this release has got two highlights: multiple picture-in-picture mode, which I'll get back to, but total cookie protection. This is exactly what they should be doing, and it's them standing out against Chrome as the private browser. And I think we do have to take our hats off to them. This is excellent. More of this, please.
Absolutely agree. And this is exactly what we were talking about years ago, it feels like. I don't know when it was, but keeping the cookies for one website completely separate from the cookies from another. So they can't reach in, as their diagram shows, can't reach in and rootle around in your cookie jar and see what's what. This is just a great win for privacy across the whole internet. And I really hope that this will encourage people to perhaps move back to Firefox that have been using Chrome.
Or if it doesn't do that, it at least might force Google to implement the same policy in Chrome, which would be better than we are now.
Good for consumers, less good for the overall ecosystem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. We have been a bit critical of Firefox, and it's a bit like, you know, a very close friend who's an alcoholic. You know, you've got to tell him the truth.
What are you trying to say to me?
But I mean, I've been using Firefox now for the last few months in total privacy mode, which is a pretty restrictive way of using the web. But things like this mean that I could slowly kind of start to enable functionality again in Firefox to make it a more pleasant experience.
Yeah, that is worth mentioning, that this for now is only in that hardcore privacy mode.
Yeah, and it's only when you enable it you realize just how much you secretly rely on staying logged in, having cross-site connections, your what's in your checkout surviving from one session to the next. Even frustrating things like the videos that get suggested to you by YouTube, when they become frustratingly random, you know that it's having an effect.
But then how am I going to get my sweet videos about people making guitars out of shelves and stuff? But speaking of video, that's the other thing. Multiple picture-in-picture. Now, I don't get it. I don't get it. Like, one picture-in-picture, fair enough, but this can fill your whole fucking screen with 9 different videos. This literally is Back to the Future 2. where he turns the telly on and says, can I have, the channel 765, whatever. And he's got just this big grid of, like, who wants to watch more than one video at once, for fuck's sake?
I just watched the video of their video in a video, and I agree with you as well. I just, like, what?
Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense, does it?
It sounds to me like they wrote a function for doing the picture-in-picture thing, and they thought it can take a value up to 9, so let's make it 9.
Yeah.
Did you ever see that iPhone meme where people were saying, what we really want is a headphone port, and Apple saying, 4 cameras? Well, this is the same. What we really want, Firefox, is privacy, and they've got, 9 videos.
Yeah, but I don't know, maybe the kids want this sort of thing. Maybe we have reached that weird singularity where we just, like, can't recognize what's going on in reality anymore, and kids want to watch 9 fucking videos at once. Okay, this episode is sponsored by Linode. Go to linode.com/late-night-linux to get started with $100 free credit and 60 days to use it. Linode offers cloud computing solutions in data centers all over the world. Whether it's scalable VMs with a choice of major distros or one-click apps and stacks, dedicated CPU and high RAM instances, block and object storage, or cloud firewalls and DDoS protection, Linode has everything you need for your personal projects right up to managed enterprise infrastructure. I recently moved our website over to Linode, and it was really straightforward. And when I needed a Mumble server for our community meetups, spinning up a new VM for that was an absolute breeze. Everything's been running flawlessly since I set it up, and I love the peace of mind I get from the automatic backups. So go to linode.com/late-night-linux, get your $100 credit, and check out Linode's great cloud hosting services and first-class, always available support. That's linode.com/late-night-linux. Let's talk about the framework laptop then. This is an upcoming product, I suppose, that is a user serviceable and repairable and upgradable laptop that isn't clunky and shit like an old ThinkPad. Sorry, Popey. But this looks like a sleek, modern-ish laptop.
It's not bad.
Yeah, it looks modern enough. And obviously, there are going to be some compromises if you don't have soldered RAM and you can update stuff. And there's promises of like ports that you can slide in and change and stuff. It seems like a great idea in theory, but there's no word on pricing yet. And I think that's the elephant in the room here.
There's a photo of the laptop there, and beside it you can see some of the various bits and pieces that you can swap out. One of those is an NVMe drive, and another one is a Wi-Fi card. Now, they've been like swappable in even the cheapest Dell or HP laptop since forever. So I don't think that in itself is especially good.
Increasingly not so, Will. Increasingly not so. Storage is increasingly soldered down these days.
Fuck that shit.
Fuck that shit indeed. And that's why we need stuff like this framework laptop to keep this dream alive. You think that goes without saying that you can upgrade your storage, but believe me, the industry is going the way of soldered fucking everything.
Yeah, which if you happen to have a M1, good luck with that, as that bug is trashing it as we speak.
Yeah, exactly. What is it, like the swap thing or something?
Yeah, I think so.
Just pounding that SSD into death, and then it's soldered on, and it's fuck all you can do, apart from send it to Apple. Get a genius to fix it.
See, I love this idea, this laptop, because I still have my original XPS, and it was the 2nd gen one, and it works brilliant. I mean, I can see at some point, like, I only use it when I'm actually going away, so the battery doesn't get taxed on it, because I charge it to about half and then leave it in a bag, and it sits there for months. I would love to be able to just keep this thing ticking over. Like right now, it's totally fine, but I can see a point where, some component somewhere is going to change, like wireless 6 or whatever is going to come out. And then I'm going to be looking at it going, oh, am I going to let this on my network and bring everything else down with it? Or, maybe the keyboard goes eventually. It would be great to be able to change those things. And like, I don't need it to be thinner. I don't need it to be overly faster either. I mean, it does a job, does a simple task. I mean, that'd be a great thing to be able to do.
I really like the idea, and I hate to be negative about it, but I think the most important thing about laptops and computers in general is that they reach a critical mass of distribution, that enough people have them to make upgrades important enough for people to support them for years and years on end. I mean, I usually have my laptop for, my current one I got it in 2013. So is this company going to be successful enough that, in in 2030 I'll be able to buy a replacement module for something that's failed. I really doubt it. And will the hardware still be relevant? I doubt that as well. I mean, we know how difficult it is to stick with a single kind of processor architecture on the desktop. And as much as I love the idea, and I think I had the same reservations about the modular phones, I just doesn't seem practical. I think you're much better off. I hate the waste. I do think that storage should be swappable, but otherwise, I'd rather things be recyclable, and you buy as good as you can get at the time. They last 10 years.
Well, they are promising that you'll be able to swap out the motherboard and therefore get the latest processors and stuff. But that seems a little bit of a dream to me. Being able to swap out the battery and the keyboard and the storage and wireless card and stuff, that's all pretty straightforward, and having socketed RAM rather than soldered RAM, that's all doable right now. But being able to swap out the motherboards, I'm a little bit skeptical of that.
I don't know. I mean, if you've taken a reasonably modern laptop apart, which apparently I haven't, but even so, the ThinkPad X270 I've got, which I appreciate is not modern, has got a tiny motherboard in it. I can see those things being, I guess everything's on the chip now, but I can see those things being quite easily swappable.
In theory, but it depends whether they're going to be around that long. And that's what everyone's saying. Like, this is a startup. Are they going to last more than a couple of years? It depends. It depends how much people value this modularity and repairability in their laptops. And I just worry that people don't.
And it will be too expensive, and you'll be able to buy 2 ThinkPads for the cost of one of these. And that will be the end of it, unfortunately.
Yeah, or 2 of any big company laptop. But, I think that, like buying Linux first hardware, you have to be willing to vote with your wallet. And will enough people do this? I fear not, unfortunately, in this particular case.
Well, we should, like the iFixit rating, we should, I don't want to say it's enforceable, but it would be nice if there was they were enforced to kind of publish the kind of fixability rating for a device.
Well, the French are forcing Apple to do that, aren't they?
That does ring a bell. And weirdly, I've got an 8-year-old MacBook Pro, and Macs are the worst for this kind of thing, but a speaker broke in it, and my daughter's been using it for her schoolwork. And I ordered the speaker from eBay, cheap Chinese one. It was £16 for the pair. And we took it apart and swapped out the speakers in there, no problem. And that's simply because there are so many MacBook Pros out there.
Yeah. Like when I needed a replacement cooler fan, I got the whole shebang for my wife's VivoBook. I mean, that's an Asus VivoBook, which is relatively common. And so I was able to get one for 20 or 30 quid or whatever. That was 4 or 5 years ago, I think. And that was easy because it is a common laptop, whereas this is not going to be common unless it suddenly takes off, which seems unlikely because they're going to suffer from the economies of scale here. So it's such an excellent idea, and maybe it'll just move that Overton window or whatever slightly back in the right direction, and maybe it'll make the big OEMs think, well, maybe socketed RAM and proper NVMe storage is a good idea still, and we'll make it a millimeter or 2 thicker, and people will want that upgradability.
No, I think what we'll end up with is which isn't a bad thing, but the equivalent of the RepRap 3D printer. But I mean, which is incredibly utilitarian, but it's produced all kinds of 3D printers, commercial and homebrew, and maybe we just need that.
All right, let's talk about Red Hat then. And they put up a post on their blog extending no-cost Red Hat Enterprise Linux to open source organizations. Now, the bottom line is that they have been giving free licenses of RHEL to the likes of GNOME and stuff for ages, but that's always been a bit mate rate type thing, and it's never been formalized. So now they're looking to formalize this process, and you can email them and apply and all the rest of it. So nothing really has changed here, but it's just made it more structured and formal, I suppose. And this obviously comes off the back of them killing CentOS effectively, or CentOS Linux as they call it, or CentOS Classic as the register have decided to dub it, because now you can use CentOS Stream, which is just not CentOS. So it's a bit of a non-story really, because this was happening anyway, but this is just their PR attempt, I suppose, to try and smooth things over. They could have perhaps done with talking about this a few months ago at the same time as the PR clusterfuck. But, better late than never, I suppose.
Not wanting to extract the negative out of every positive thing, do we think it's a good idea? I mean, yes, obviously, FOSS projects getting access to software is great, but is this at the expense of them going to Debian, Ubuntu, Arch, whatever it is, like a genuinely free-to-use distro? Are they trying to stem that tide, do you think?
No, because that is still an option for them. No one has to use this, but if you want to, then you can.
Yeah, that sounds like the first one's for free, though.
If you fill in the form and then you have an interview and then they decide that you're okay and then they send it to you.
Genuinely, I'm not trying to be negative on it. I just thought it was a bit of a, really, could you not just leave that to the other projects? Well, no, it's fine. It's fine. I will retract my statement.
No, I mean, it's fair enough to be a little bit skeptical of it. And yeah, obviously they want to get people using RHEL so that they can get more paid subscriptions. But even just talking about this publicly, them sort of donating to the community and they're getting some free goodwill out of it. And we're talking about it, aren't we? And we're talking about Red Hat and Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and it's effectively free advertising for them. So I think it's fair enough, really, because no one's being forced to do it. And if you're using CentOS as an open source project, say you're a small open source project, and now that's going to be a ball ache, and what do you do? Getting a nice free upgrade to RHEL, which you can't imagine they're going to rescind on. They surely will just keep in perpetuity giving people that. Otherwise, it's going to be terrible fucking PR.
Like this was.
Yeah, the whole CentOS Stream thing was.
I will stop being negative.
Okay, this episode is sponsored by Datadog, the full-stack observability platform for real-time Linux monitoring. Create drag-and-drop dashboards to easily monitor enriched log data, seamlessly trace requests across distributed systems, and pivot between correlated data for rapid troubleshooting. With Datadog, you can improve performance with proactive alerts forecasting Linux OS resource usage and more. Break down communication barriers and add context to those alerts by notifying your team members through the tools you already use, such as Slack, PagerDuty, or others. Try Datadog and get full visibility into your environment today at datadog.com/late-night-Linux. Sign up for a 2-week trial, create a dashboard, and you'll receive a free Datadog t-shirt. That's datadog.com/late-night-Linux. On to a bit of admin then. And first of all, thank you everyone who's supporting us on PayPal and Patreon. It really is appreciated. If you want to join those people, you can go to latenightlinux.com/support. And remember, for $5 or more per month on Patreon, you can get an advert-free RSS feed. And if you want to get in contact, latenightlinux.com/contact. So an update on FOSS Talk Live. It's going to be on Saturday, the 12th of June. We think at 7 p.m. And we decided that it's going to be a smaller affair than it could have been. It's going to be just the usual suspects, basically, just the sort of European podcast, because we didn't want to have to deal with time zones and just more complication. Last year was just abandoned, and then at the last minute, let's have a mumble thing. This time, it's taking what would have been the standard event and making it online. We'll see what happens after that. But expect to see Linux lads with friends, probably. Us. I don't know whether it'll be just us or that we'll have friends and guests. I don't know. We'll see about that. And then what I'm dubbing Ubuntu Voltage, which is basically Ubuntu Podcast and Stuart. And then at the end, there might even be a special one-off new show with me, Popey, and Dan.
Is it new?
It's always new. It's every time it's different questions. It's a new show. So anyway, more details coming up on that. But yes, mark your calendars, 12th of June, Saturday night in the UK, evening time, probably like 7 till 11 or 8 till midnight or something like that. I don't know. We'll have to decide exactly. But it should be good fun. Also, a quick reminder of the Community Mumble get-together. The next one is going to be on Thursday, the 11th of March at 10 p.m. So normally it's Friday night, but this one we're going to try Thursday night. Details at latenightlinux.com/mumble. And check out Late Night Linux Extra as well, where I've been posting recordings that we've been doing on these. It's only a snippet. We normally talk for like 2-3 hours and just record like a little bit of it. So check out that. I'll put a link in the show notes. All right, well, a quick Xfce Korner. That didn't really work, did it? Xfce Korner. Anyway, So, Ubuntu 20.04 progress update.
Have they got colours now?
Oh, yes, very funny. Anyway, so yeah, Sean Davis posts about what's coming up with Xfce 4.16 and stuff. It's worth a read if you like Xfce like me. But then, a few days later, devastating news from Sean. Sean has been instrumental in pushing Ubuntu and Xfce forward. But like now he's decided that it's not that he's had enough, but in terms of his own computers, he's moving to Elementary OS, which, you know, is great and everything. But I don't see the appeal for an Xfce user. It's very strange. But he posts about how he's going to get involved with development of that and how he will continue to do what he's doing for Ubuntu and Xfce, but that because it's not his daily driver anymore, it means that, you know, he can't be as committed to it. And, you know, ultimately you have to assume that if this goes well with Elementary, he's going to just move over there. So this is a blow. This is a real blow because Xfce and Ubuntu had stagnated for a while before he stepped up and really started pushing it.
Lol.
I mean, I'm talking serious stagnation, like not even GTK3 and stuff.
Did it go backwards?
That pixel's out of place.
You lot are such piss-taking bastards, honestly. But yeah, this is bad news, and I hope that it isn't as bad as I fear, but we'll have to see. So KDE Korner then, you've got a few here.
Yeah, just a bit of an update on the Plasma Mobile for February. The quite interesting thing is the fact that this got picked as the desktop environment for the Pine phone on top of Manjaro, which is quite cool. And they've put a lot of work into this, and the new home screen looks really good. I like the new wallpaper, the search built in, and then the add and remove and thing. There's a nice wee video there to show you how it runs. And I mean, yes, it looks pretty much like the way an Android system would, but I think that paradigm is pretty fixed in stone these days. They cleared up a load of dialer bugs, things like that as well. There was issues where it would suspend and then kill it. So obviously not quite ideal for a phone. And Eliza is getting ported to it as well, which is the media app available. And there's a whole rake of other things that have been updated too. So really good. And it'd be great to see somebody do a review of that soon.
Well, yeah, that Pine phone that I've had sitting around for ages, I tried to get it organised to be sent to you, Phelan, but because it's got a battery in it, and I don't know if Brexit has anything to do with it, but it's not very practical. So it's going to be diverted to you, Graham. So it's going to be on you to organise getting it and checking it out, and hopefully we can talk about it.
Yeah, I'll keep it safe for you, Phelan.
What's this documentation thing then?
Yeah, just a very quick one is just to see that the documentation at KDE development side and user side is being updated all the time. And, you know, some quite new resources for developers, dbus tutorials, and the new sensor stuff is in there. And they're trying to make it look good and help new developers along. So I think that's always healthy to try and get new developers in, get them interested, and to have good resources there to help them along. So that's quite good. And as we speak, the KDE Summer Code is going on at the moment, or some season of code, I think it is maybe. So, you know, that's good. New people in board. That's what we want.
Offline updates for KDE Neon. I don't like the look of this.
I had no idea what this meant. I had to ask you. I was like, what is this? So apparently this is the atrocity that is the way Windows updates work, where it says you've got updates, you apply them on the next reboot. So the next time you start your computer and you forgot about it, it takes 3 weeks to start up and you never get a chance to do your work, and then you have to go home. I'm sure it won't be quite that bad, but I don't know if this needed to be fixed. I mean, maybe it did. Maybe I just never noticed it. I've always used apt and it's been fine. But if you use Discover or PKCon, the command line tool, it's now going to have an offline trigger mode, they call it. And then for updates that used to kind of get into this weird state where libraries would get updated underneath, and then things like the lock screen would break, things like that. Those updates will now be done on a fresh restart. So
you can, with PKCon, pass some arguments now to make it do it offline, as they call it. So you can still do that, and you can still use apt-get, as I do.
Yeah.
So it's only changing the default rather than taking that behavior away. So it's fine, but it's not going to affect me. I never use...
No, me neither. And yeah, I mean, to be honest, it probably is a nicer way of doing it.
Yeah, for some people, I suppose. But yeah, I can see the argument for what it's going to fix, but as long as they don't take away my apt-get, then I'm fine.
Cold dead hands.
Indeed. All right, well, we better get out of here then. We'll be back next week when we'll be talking about all sorts of things. But until then, I've been Joe.
I've been Phenom.
I've been Graham.
And I've been Will.
See you later.